This is a Cajun chicken Alfredo. It's one pot, which is amazing. You can double it, triple it, however much you need, but it makes it so easy that you can make it all over on the stovetop in one pot. I'm gonna be doing that, but then I'm actually transferring it to an aluminum pan. And that's because we're gonna be taking it with us somewhere, and it's just a lot easier to take that. I am doubling this recipe. So I'm gonna be using about a ½ pound of chicken and then these organic Cajun style andouille chicken sausages. You don't have to use chicken sausages. You can use whatever kind you want. But I'm starting off by just cutting the chicken breasts in half, like you guys know I love to do. I prefer to thin it out. And then we're gonna cut it into strips and then bite-sized pieces. Now, I actually do not have a pot big enough to double this recipe and cook it all at the same time, which is really unfortunate. So we're gonna be doing 2 rounds. We're gonna be making the exact same recipe twice. And this recipe only takes about 30 minutes, so it's not too big of a deal to have to do that. But if you have a really big pot, then you might be okay. I'm cutting these at an angle just because I like the way they look when they're cut at an angle. So feel free to cut them however you want. Completely fine, either way. All right, just to make a little more room on my cutting board, I'm gonna go ahead and get the chicken started in my pot right here. I am gonna take my salt and just season the chicken a bit with the salt. You could probably do this once it gets in your pan. All right, let's go into the oil with the chicken. And I'm just gonna go ahead and cook all of the chicken right now. You can definitely do this in batches. Well, actually, let me see what it looks like. I think I'm actually gonna do it in batches just to make sure we don't have overcrowding. We have a good saute on half of the chicken, so I'm gonna transfer to a plate and then do the second round. All right, again, we have our chicken that is nicely browned, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull that. Now, if your sausage is uncooked, you definitely wanna go ahead and cook it at this point. Since I'm gonna be adding it into the pasta and it's really just a reheat, I'm not worried about throwing that in right now. It's all gonna get heated up in this pot. All right, I have about 4 cloves of garlic. We're gonna quickly saute that, very quickly. And add in 4 cups or 1 quart of broth. This is bone broth. Feel free to use chicken broth. Okay, we wanna scrape the bottom because anything that's at the bottom has extra flavor. My heat is on right about medium right now. Okay, I have about 2½ cups of heavy cream that we are gonna add into this pot. And then about a tablespoon of Cajun seasoning. This is where you can make it less spicy if you wanna add less of that. And let's just stir all of that together and let that just come up to temperature. This all came out of the fridge, so it's kind of cold right now. We're nearing a simmer, so I'm gonna pour in 1 box of this penne pasta, and we are going to fully bring it up to a simmer. All right, friends, we have a simmer, so let's add in half of that sausage. Yours would already be in there if it was not fully cooked sausage. And again, I'm adding half because I am doubling this recipe, so I'm gonna be doing this exact same process again in about 20 minutes. And we're also gonna add back in half of the chicken. All right, stir all of that together. And I'm gonna turn my heat to low and put a lid on this, and it's gonna cook for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're waiting on that pasta to get done. The noodles are softened. They're nice and al dente, so we can leave that lid off now. Now we need to add in the cheese so that we can make our sauce. Okay, so we need to turn our heat all the way off, and we're actually going to remove the pot from the heat, so I'm gonna back it up a little bit. And we're going to slowly add in our Parmesan cheese. Overall, we're using about 4 ounces of Parmesan, but you don't want to add it all in at one time. They don't mix well when you do that, so you gotta go slow. Okay, I am adding parsley because I feel like it needs color. Also, it is not spicy at all. I mean, you could definitely go heavier on the Cajun seasoning. Cajun doesn't necessarily mean spicy, but if you want it to be a little spicier, if you want a little more Cajun flavor, feel free to top it with some more of that. Let's get the pasta into this travel container. Go all in. It looks delicious. Actually, you know what? Let me just put a little bit in a bowl so that I can taste it on camera for you guys. All right, we got a little bit over here separated. And I'm gonna top this with parsley just so it looks really pretty. Oh, we left a sausage in there. Don't wanna do that. All right, now we just cover with foil and it's ready to travel. All right, before I wrap this up, if the sauce is almost just thick enough, it's almost there, so I'm leaving it uncovered just for a couple more minutes. Let's give this a taste. I'm gonna taste the sausage and see how spicy the sausage is. All right, the sausage packs a little heat. The sauce is really flavorful, good flavor on the chicken. This is very good. I like this one a lot. Honestly, the sauce is really not that spicy, but that chicken sausage that I used is. So you could absolutely make this and it's still gonna be Cajun, but not spicy Cajun if you just don't use a spicy sausage. But very good, good flavor, super easy to make. Tonight for dinner, we are making a 1-pot balsamic chicken. I'm gonna make it in the cast iron skillet, but you can make it in whatever pan you have that goes on the stovetop and also in the oven, because this is gonna go in the oven. My daughter and I are actually gonna be working on this recipe together, so let's head over to the other side of the kitchen where the majority of this is gonna happen. For our tomato, mozzarella, and basil mixture, we're gonna take these grape tomatoes and just cut them in half. Okay, so I think the recipe calls for like 8 ounces, but this is 10 ounces, so it's really not, you know, all that different. We're just gonna go ahead and use all of them. That one's really big, so let's cut that into 4s. I'm gonna transfer all of these to a bowl, and we're gonna add a few other things to it. But let's go ahead and get those other things cut. You guys, I have a new basil plant, so we're gonna pull some basil off of that basil plant and just chop it up nicely. So we want about 2 tablespoons or so of the chopped basil. If you don't like the taste of fresh basil, remember this is not gonna be raw, it's gonna get cooked into this recipe. So maybe that would make a difference, but the other option is obviously you can just use dried basil. I have these mozzarella pearls here. This is an 8-ounce container of these pearls. We're gonna put all of them here into this bowl. Okay, let's try and break this up a little bit here. Okay, so my daughter's gonna help me cook tonight, so there's some stuff she's gonna do in just a minute here. But before we move on from this, actually, I'm probably gonna reserve some of this so we can have it a little bit on the side, like a little side salad, but most of it is gonna go into the mixture, the chicken mixture. I'm gonna season this with a little bit of salt, and then we're just gonna toss all of this together. You can also add some olive oil or balsamic vinegar if this is something that you're just gonna be serving as a little side salad, but there's gonna be balsamic and olive oil, or we're gonna use avocado oil in the pan that we're cooking the chicken in and the sauce, so I don't want to do it overboard. The next step is to make the sauce that's gonna go into our pan with the chicken here. So we've got this measuring cup here, and we need to add 1/3 cup of balsamic vinegar. We are adding about 2 tablespoons of honey, about 2 tablespoons of oil, and I'm using avocado oil, but feel free to use olive oil if that's what you prefer. We are adding about 2 teaspoons of garlic, or 2 garlic cloves. We need 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. And then we need to add about a tablespoon of, technically we need Dijon mustard, and I'm very aware that stone ground is not the same thing. We are out of Dijon and we're gonna use stone ground. I actually really like the flavor of stone ground, so 1 tablespoon. That's good. Okay, let's mix this sauce together and then just set it to the side. We have our sauce made up. We also have the tomato, mozzarella, and basil mixture. So the next step is to start on the chicken. We are going to do this in the cast iron skillet just because that's what I like to use for these kind of things. Now we are gonna preheat the oven to 400 degrees. We are gonna need the oven for a little bit of this recipe. And I'm going to put some oil into the bottom of my cast iron skillet here. While the oil is heating up, I'm gonna season my chicken here. We're using chicken thighs instead of chicken breasts, but you can use whatever you prefer. I'm using my favorite Kevin seasoning to add some flavor to these. You can just use salt and pepper if that's what you prefer. Let's start adding these in. You should get a simmer. Oh yeah. We're just gonna let this cook on both sides for 1 to 2 minutes, just until we get some nice color on the underside, or on each side. And then it's gonna go in the oven after that. As you can see, we're getting good color there. That's what you wanna see right there. Oh yeah, this is gonna be really good. Let that one go a little longer. All right, we are turning the heat off. We do not need it on anymore. I'm gonna space these out kind of evenly here. And we are going to take that lovely sauce that we made and pour it all over the top. It's gonna simmer right away because the pan is still hot. Just scraping the bottom of the pan in case there's any of those really tasty brown bits at the bottom. You want that added to your flavor. We're just about ready to put this in the oven, so I'm gonna take my tomato mozzarella mixture and it's gonna go all around here, okay? But like I said, I personally am reserving some just so we can have a little tomato and mozzarella salad. That's something that we enjoy, so that can go with our dinner tonight, which obviously goes with the flavors. And I wanted to do that, but also I'm doing it out of necessity so that the cheese does not go bad and it is wasted. All right, I wanna add a little bit more basil. Let's put this in the oven. This is gonna go in the oven for about 18 to 20 minutes until the chicken is cooked through. All right, before serving, this needs to sit for about 5 minutes and then we will serve it up. It looks so good. This balsamic chicken was such a quick put together meal and it was really delicious. I love that it was all cooked in one pan. You guys know how much I love those, but even better if it's got fantastic flavor. Tonight's dinner is a one-pot meal. However, there are some things that I need to prep first so that we can actually make this one-pot meal. And the first thing that I need to do is shred up some cheese. So if you're new here, you may not have seen me use this. We use it for cheese, cucumber, for tzatziki sauce. We shred carrots, like this thing, we use it for everything. So anyway, shredding up this Parmesan because that's what we're gonna need for this recipe. For the recipe, we only need 3 tablespoons, so we can really not worry about shredding up more than this right here. This is how great this thing is. Now it can just go in the dishwasher, which is currently running, so it can't go in the dishwasher right now. Now we need to make up a Cajun seasoning that's gonna go on our chicken. You can use as much or as little of the spices as you want. I'm gonna start with some thyme and I'm using about a teaspoon. I don't really measure this just because I've made up this specific recipe so many times. I'm so cool. Add some oregano, again, about a teaspoon. Also, you can buy Cajun seasoning if you don't wanna mix it up, that's totally fine. We are going to add some onion powder, and I think we usually do like in between a half teaspoon and a teaspoon, and then same with garlic powder, in between a half teaspoon and a teaspoon. I love adding paprika. That is a must for me in a Cajun seasoning. And we like to add about a teaspoon of this, so we do not shy away from the paprika. Also, paprika adds beautiful color, so that's another reason for it. Cayenne pepper, I usually do about a 1/4 teaspoon, but this is the one that if you feel like a 1/4 teaspoon is gonna be too much for your family, just go less on that one and it's gonna be okay. And then as far as the salt goes, I usually do about a 1/2 teaspoon. Again, feel free to go less on that if that's something that you prefer. And now our Cajun seasoning is ready to go. That can just be mixed together. Obviously you can whisk this with a fork, but I already told you that the dishwasher is currently running and I'm trying to prevent filling up my sink. Okay, I've got these sun-dried tomatoes right here that I found in a bag, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I really like these and I haven't been able to find them again. So I went into Harris Teeter the other day and the only sun-dried tomatoes that I could find were the ones, you know, that are in the oil in the jar. And you can add oil to these. You can rehydrate these with some oil if you want to, but I always find they're just fine throwing into a recipe. This bag was so much cheaper than the jar, so I really hope I can find them again. It's not like I looked for a really long time. You know, I probably could give it some more effort, but I ran in there specifically for sun-dried tomatoes for a church recipe, and I just couldn't find them. So anyway, be on the lookout because I really actually like those a lot. Okay, so this is not the proper knife to do this with, but the other ones are in the dishwasher. We need about 3 tablespoons, 2 to 3 tablespoons, just depending on how much you love. Okay, let's just add these to a bowl so that this was a larger bowl than I needed, but that's okay. We're gonna add these to a bowl so they'll be ready to go. Now, you can use whatever kind of chicken you prefer, but I am gonna be using chicken thighs. As I'm cutting these into small pieces, I'm going to just add them directly to the spice mixture that we made. Bite-sized pieces, or you could even cut it into strips if that's your preference. So this is technically a 1-pot meal. Obviously there's some prep involved with this one. Once we're done with this prep work, we'll just take everything over to the stovetop. Let's just mix that together in those awesome spices. And we are going to then head over to the stovetop where everything else is gonna happen, because this was the last bit of the prep work for this recipe. So I just like to make sure you wanna mix it well, because I wanna make sure each bite gets this amazing Cajun flavor. Also, when I say Cajun, don't be afraid of that word because it doesn't necessarily have to mean spicy. I think that's subjective to each household. So if you are not a huge fan of spice, you can just take that down a notch by cutting down the amount of cayenne. Just cut down a little bit of cayenne pepper. All right, friends, let's get our heat on I'm gonna start with like medium. We're really just gonna melt the butter at this point. We've got a tablespoon of butter in here and about a 1/2 tablespoon of avocado oil, but feel free to use whatever kind of oil you prefer. Okay, the butter is melted, so I'm gonna crank up the heat a bit so that we can get a nice sear on the chicken. I just wanna make sure when we put that chicken in, we get a good sear on it. Now I'm just gonna let this sear for a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna add in a couple other ingredients. Trying to get somewhat of a single layer here, just so that we can get all of it with a nice sear. You can smell all the herbs here, this fragrance. Oh my goodness, I love a meal that includes so much fragrance like this when it's cooking. Oh yeah, look at that color right there. That is beautiful. Let's turn our heat down to low so that we can add in everything else. If you're choosing to use onion, this is where you would add that, but we're gonna add in about 2 cloves of minced garlic. We wanna add in those 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons-ish of sun-dried tomatoes. We also want to add in 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. Okay, let's mix all that together. Remember, I said I turned my heat down to a low. We don't wanna burn the garlic or anything. We just want everything to come together and be really fragrant. So this is just gonna cook for about 3 minutes or so on this low heat. My goodness, you guys, the smell is incredible. This is going to be so good. Also, once you get everything kind of ready to go, This comes together pretty quickly. I mean, it's a one pot meal. You know, one pot meals are actually they're pretty easy in and of themselves, but it's also about a 30-minute meal, which is fantastic. This is one of those where you're gonna get a great meal on the table in a short amount of time. Let's take 1 cup of Orzo, and we're going to add this in. And what I like to do is just toast up the Orzo a little bit. So you're adding it in and just mixing it around, letting it toast up a bit before you add in the cooking liquid. It's probably not totally necessary. This is just a step that I usually take. I have 1 cup of chicken broth. This is actually chicken bone broth. Let's add that in. And we're gonna bring this up to a simmer. So I am gonna go to about medium heat. Mix everything together, making sure that that Orzo is gonna get nicely cooked. Even though we're putting a lid on this, you do want to stir it occasionally. So 20 minutes, but I'm gonna stir it at least every 4 to 5 minutes. All right, one thing to note about Orzo is it has a tendency to soak up liquid pretty quickly. So you can see here, I mean, it's not dry, but it's starting to soak it up, and I still have 7 minutes left on the timer. So we're gonna add a little bit of water to this to make sure that it continues cooking. I'm gonna start with about a 1/4 cup. I'll keep this here just in case we need a little bit more, but that's really typical. That you shouldn't be alarmed if that happens. Okay, we have about 1 minute left. Giving its final stir. I've got some spinach here, and I actually am gonna cut this up a little bit before putting it in there, but I'm just gonna use my scissors to do it. So in this last minute, I'm gonna grab a stack, kind of stack them on top of each other like so, and we're just going to create kind of like ribbons. We're just mixing this together and letting that spinach wilt. At this point, my heat is just on low. It's basically just keeping everything warm. That spinach is wilting really nicely. We have 1/4 cup of heavy cream. I'm gonna pour that in and mix it all together. You could probably skip that step if you want to cut down on the fat content. I mean, it looked delicious even before that. So I honestly think it would be good even without that heavy cream. Now the heavy cream obviously is gonna cut the spice just a little bit. So it really just depends on what you're looking for there. And now we are going to add a couple of tablespoons of Parmesan, about 3, and then I'll probably just top each plate with a little bit. This is really good. The only suggestion that I personally would make is to add a little more cayenne, because I think I personally and my husband would like a little more heat with this recipe, but overall the flavors are very good. Definitely taste that tomato paste, that tomato base of this recipe, the little bit of sun-dried tomatoes. You might even want to add a little more of those if you're a fan of sun-dried tomatoes, but the Orzo's cooked to perfection. In my opinion, it's that's al dente. Very, very good option for dinner.
Our verse today comes from Romans 15:5. May the God of endurance and encouragement grant you to live in such harmony with one another, in accord with Christ Jesus. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you need more inspiration, I have tons of it here for you. Go ahead and check out this video that you see listed above, and you're gonna get so many more good recipes that you are going to love. Have a great week.